In this section, we're going to be compiling all of the components that we made and adding them into an assembly so that we can make it turn like you saw in the intro. First, going to start off by selecting the Create button, Document, and naming it Piston Assembly so that we remember where we're going to be putting all these pieces. Make sure that before we start, all of your pieces have been created a version, or rather, every piece has its own version. For example, if I just create a sketch on here and then add a circle on it, if I wanted to import this into my assembly, I wouldn't unless I pressed this button up here called Create Version, named it whatever I wanted, and press Create. Now it would be able to be imported into our assembly as it has a version of which the assembly can draw from. Moving on, we're going to go into our assembly and we're going to start by selecting Insert. We're going to go to Other Documents and we're going to start by getting every piece that we need. If you do not have this base, like you see here, that's okay. There's another way to do it so that using only the crankshaft. If you do have the base and you're able to import it, then we're going to be doing a simple, it's only a difference of this piston cover rests resting on these hooks and the crankshaft resting on these forks versus everything being centered around the crankshaft. So now we're just going to import everything. Make sure that you get 2 of everything in order to fit everywhere, including 4 of these end knobs. If you want to add them, they're not required. And then with that, we have every piece we need to create this. We're now going to select this check mark and they can be moved around. If you do not have this base, so your document looks like this right now after you've inserted everything, we are going to be selecting this Revolute Mate, hovering our mouse right over the center of the middle cylinder until we see this Revolute Mate around the center of it. We're going to select it as the first one, and then we're going to go to our origin. We're then going to press the origin as we want our crankshaft to go here. And you'll see that when I press play, it spins around the origin. You can see this that even after I press the check mark, I can hold the crankshaft and I can turn it. If you do have the base, then it's a little different. We're going to be hovering over Fasten Mate, going for the bottom face of the base, selecting it, and then selecting our origin. This keeps it locked in the very center, and you'll see I cannot move this base no matter where I try. This will help make sure that everything stays centered and where we want it to be. Now that we have that, we're going to select Revolute Mate, look for the end cylinder, hover over the center of it, and then once again hover over the center of this fork. When I press play, you can make sure that I did it right, and we can see this now turns on our base. However, it does not move, which is exactly what we wanted. Now we gotta start getting these pieces onto our crankshaft so that our entire assembly looks accurate rather than just 2 pieces. We're to start off by selecting Revolute Mate, going over to our connecting rod, and getting the center. We're then going to go over to either the second or fourth cylinder, as you see here. These are the 2 that'll be holding a connecting rod, and we can add in to allow it to spin. And you can see they spin around. And do the same thing with the other. Center of the connecting arm into the center of the second or fourth cylinder on our crankshaft. And align it to how we want. And that's that done. Now, we're going to move on to this wrist pin. We're going to hover over the middle of the wrist pin, select it, and then select the top cylinder of our connecting rod on the top of it. Now it's hard to see, but the center wrist pin can spin on the inside of the connecting rod. Do that once again with the other one, and we're ready to move on. Now this next step's going to be a little bit different because there's not a fastener in a place that we want on these piston heads. So we're going to go to new mate connector. Instead of on entity, we're going to change it to between entities. And our origin entity is going to be the center right here. Fiddle around with it until you can get this center fastener. After you selected your origin entity, it's going to ask for your between. Go to the other side of the piston head and select this other opening. This will put a fastener, or a mate rather, right in the middle, facing the direction that we want. We're going to do that once more with the other. Same thing as the other. Mate connector between our first, our second, and then check mark. Now they're ready to go onto our assembly. I'm just going to move everything closer so we don't need to be zoomed out as much. So we're going to press Revolute Mate, select the new mate connector. If you cannot select it, you can choose it from over here. As you can see, I want this mate connector. You can name them if you want, but I have selected the one over here over our wrist pin. Now that that's on, you can see when I press play or even check mark, I can move this around. This will let it stay in the same position while the rest of the crankshaft moves around. Once again, it's the same thing with the other. Select the mate connector, select the wrist pin, check. This next step, however, is a bit tricky. There's no simple way to do it. We're first going to start off by aligning our piston head as best as we can in the place that we want. I would say that is a good area. We're then going to grab one of our piston head covers, turn it 90 degrees to the left, go to another view, and we're going to orient it in the way that we want it. So we want to go to the top, go to the side, and we're going to spin it. And we're going to keep spinning it until it lines up with where we want it. So I didn't turn it off, so I'm going to have to go to it, and I'm going to have to spin it like this, go to the side of it, and spin it once again. 90 degrees should be enough. And if we move here, I'm going to try and align it the best I can with these two hooks. If you are doing the variant that only uses the connecting rod and not the base, this part is much simpler and you can orient it however you want. You don't need to make sure it lines up with anything, as it will not look different if you don't. However, if you are doing this way, this is a step that must be done, and you'll see this is my best attempt. This is what it looks like when we line them up. We're then going to select the slider mate now. Look for the top of this piston head, select that, change our angle, and select the side of the cover rest. Press that, and when you play, the piston head should move up and down. Now that we're in as close to this position as possible, you'll see after we put the sliding mate, I can't move. I can only move this cover rest in one direction, and that's straight in line with that slider axis. So now we have to use the crankshaft in order to find our good position. After we've lined up everything, we turn it. I quite like that position. I'm going to accept that. So now I'm going to right click the cover rest and I'm going to press fix. This means that this can no longer move on its own. There's no prompt for me to move it, and when I try to, that little fixed icon shows up. When I rotate my crankshaft, the piston head doesn't change its direction, and that's because it can only move in the same direction that the cover rest is facing. So since this cover rest can only face one direction since we fixed it, this piston head's only going to stay facing straight in line with it. And now we can turn it, and it functions just like we want. The connecting rod rotates over the crankshaft, and then with the aid of the wrist pin, the piston head can rotate in place around the connecting rod. We're now going to do the same thing with the other one. Change my view a bit. And now we're going to grab this, move it here, orient it the right way. It can be a bit tricky as it is a bit awkward to move around, but that's okay. We'll get there. Now we select this. Once again, we want to line it up as best as we possibly can. Doesn't have to be perfect, as this is just an assembly and it won't have an effect in real life, as this assembly is effectively a perfect world scenario where nothing can change. I'd say that's pretty good. So now we're going to once again add a sliding mate onto the top of the piston head in between our cover rest. Press play to make sure that the piston head is moving and not the slider as the cover rest, as this will lock the piston head position once you press the check mark. Just like last time, we're going to orient our connecting rod in a way that we want. It is going to be a bit finicky, but do your best to try and align it. Move the cover rest into the connecting rod, into a place that you want it. Once you have it in the place that you like it, fix it. Now, if you don't like the look of these mates, you can always at any time press K and they will disappear. I'm going to check to make sure it's working by spinning it. If yours is very laggy and you can only move but that much before it starts to freak out and take like 10 seconds to calculate it, that's fine. Make sure everything's saved by looking up here. If it doesn't, then if it's grayed out, that means it is. Reload your page, and it should fix some of those issues. You'll see that when I go over to it and I spin it, it works just fine. Everything is all here. And lastly, we're going to wrap up by adding these end knobs in to simulate what we would do in real life. We're going to select Fasten Mate, zoom into one of these, press this large face, go over to the wrist pins, and we're just going to press this outer layer. I forgot to press the other one. So yeah, we're going to select our face, make sure it's selected there. Go over to our wrist pin and put it in. If it does this weird thing where it doesn't align right, we can press this button over here called Flip Primary Axis, and it'll turn this Z direction to be pointing right, the pointing left or the way we want it instead, and it'll orient correctly. And now we're just going to do that for the other four. Flip, check. Fasten, find the face, find the empty wrist pin, flip, check. Get the last face, and find the last opening. It's the wrong place. And that one actually lined up, so now we're done. That is everything. We can now align ourselves to the way that we want, spin to the other side where the flywheel is for better rotation, and you can move it however you want. You can select any part that has a moving function, and it'll rotate around. It now performs exactly like a normal one would. Congratulations. If you want to print it off, it's the same steps as importing. You just select everything. You compile in real life. There's only a difference as this piece will change. I will provide you with a different piece. It was a bit of a trial and error in order to get the right shape. It may or may not work depending on the accuracy of your printer. You would need to ensure that your printer is printing at an accurate size and that it doesn't, if it misprints little pins, you will have to redo the entire print. As in my experience, it took many iterations and some just failed because the printer wound up not heating the filament to the right temperature. Anyway, that's an issue for the printing section and not the assembly part. Right now, we've just completed our assembly, so congratulations.